Hey, this is Jim at Broadfield. Thanks for joining us for another Broadfield Liquid Lunch and Learn. You will see in the corner of my screen, I have another guest on the show this week, featuring George Herbert from Epiphan. Hey, George.
Hey, how are you?
Excellent, excellent. Welcome to the show.
Thank
Obviously,
you.
we've got some exciting new Epiphan news to talk about. But before we do, we always kick off the show talking about a nice craft beer. I know I have one on the table here in front of me. Do you have one as well?
I do. I can't be seen on camera unless I lift it, but yes, I do.
Awesome. Could you tell us a little bit about yours?
Sure. So this is actually from a local brewery close to me in my neighborhood that I could almost throw a rock at from my house. I luckily have multiple of those near me, but this one is a brewery called Whippersnapper. And this is actually a beer they make that's kind of South Asian inspired. It's a ginger coriander cream ale. So it's a really nice summer beer with a little bit of kind of ginger spiciness to it, but it's a great kind of relaxed, mellow cream ale as well.
Wow, that's a lot more adventurous than what I did. I usually like to stay with the New England style IPAs. I actually have one here that I have not tried yet. It's actually out of Chicago by, what is it, Old Nation Brewing Company, and it's from their New Orthodox series, the M43 IPA. So one of the things that I've realized is I really enjoy the Citra hop. So
Mm.
anytime I see a new IPA that I haven't tried that talks about a heavy use of Citra, and in this case, it's actually combined with Simcoe and Amarillo, I go for it. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to give it a try. Cheers, George.
Yeah. Cheers.
So how are those ginger notes?
They're actually pretty strong, but not in like a ginger beer kind of way, more of a ginger ale kind of way.
Okay.
So it's very nice. It's one that's they do in the summer only, and it's kind of a go-to for me in the summer from them. But they make a lot of other stuff as well. So they do weekly releases, so it's sometimes hard to keep up with some of the new stuff that they do.
I think that's one of the most exciting things about the craft brewing industry is how they're constantly releasing and experimenting and trying new stuff, which is actually the perfect segue into our show today. Because quite honestly, that's exactly what Epiphan is doing with the Pearl family of products. You guys are just packing in new features through firmware updates, and this latest release, 4.12, is really bringing a great new feature set to the table. And George, that's why I had to invite you onto the show.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
before we get into it, can you introduce yourself to our dealers and explain to what you do at Epiphan?
Sure. So my title is the manager of support and training, although I do a lot more than that title suggests sometimes. But I primarily head up the support team here at Epiphan. But I'm also heavily involved with our sales and marketing team in doing a lot of things like this content creation. Some people joke around that I'm sometimes the face of the company because I'm on camera so much, whether it's our own webinars or joining other people. So I do a lot of things, including joining our sales team for technical demonstrations for existing or prospective customers, as well as day to day on the front line of the support team as well, helping everyone.
Absolutely. And I know you're a valuable resource to us, as well as by extension to our dealers. So anytime we do run into those specific workflow questions or support situations to help close those sales, we know that George is a great person to reach out to in those
Absolutely.
regards. So the firmware we're talking about today affects the entire Pearl family of products, including both the Pearl Mini, which I have here in front of me at $34.95 MSRP, and the Pearl 2, which starts at $63.75 MSRP. The Pearl 2 that I have up on the table, George, is the Pearl 2 base. Our dealers who are familiar with the Epiphan product line know that this exact same product is also available in a rack-mounted version. And for those higher-end applications, you can even take two of these side by side in a twin rack-mountable version available as well.
Yeah.
So without further ado, let's get into the top new feature of the 4.12 firmware release, which is SRT. George, tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about this.
Yeah, so this is a pretty big one, and really an exciting one for us. We've we've had over the past couple of years, especially when trade shows were still a thing, people coming by and asking, are you guys thinking about SRT? And we didn't for a while. We kind of had it on the periphery, trying to see if there was a critical mass of people starting to adopt SRT. And we finally reached a point where, we joined the SRT Alliance. Once it kind of got to a really significant number, there's now 300 plus companies that are involved in the SRT Alliance, and Epiphan is one of them, as along with many of our complementary partners and some competitors. And one of the things that's really interesting about SRT is the ecosystem, and it's growing very rapidly. So for those not familiar with SRT, the acronym is Secure Reliable Transport.
Right.
The concept is to basically replace maybe some of the older, becoming outdated streaming protocols like RTMP, which are very limited in what they can do. They're very old, and were never really designed around video.
Right.
And SRT was kind of designed and built, envisioned by Haivision as a protocol and open sourced to really allow a huge number of different possibilities, with the primary goals being low latency, firewall friendly, and secure, encrypted. And it does deliver all of those things, which is one of the really cool things about it.
Absolutely. And then I guess because of that, you're going to see the SRT adoption really take place in education, government, corporate communications, any of these different marketplaces where the security of that transmission becomes even more important.
Absolutely. And some of those other features really kind of make it usable to almost anyone as the adoption increases.
Sure.
And the reliability comes from essentially it has a two-way communication built into it. So not only are you sending out your primary video and audio stream the way you would with something like RTMP, but there's also essentially a back channel of data for diagnostics and packet recovery. And this allows just a more reliable connection. You can get real statistics as to what's happening, and it also allows you to, based on those statistics, make adjustments to correct for maybe weaker or connections that are struggling. So you can look at statistics like the amount of packets you're dropping and adjust your latency so that that error correction can help you and stabilize everything and improve your connection overall, all while still being encrypted and all these other things. So it's got a lot of cool technology built into it that's becoming very important for live streams.
Absolutely. And in this workflow diagram here, you're showing that back channel data packet recovery going back through those dotted black lines, coming back from the CDN and the server, which again allows you to take that secure channel and ultimately have that reliability, which is what SRT brings to the table.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the key features of SRT, obviously, is the ability for it to bring in a remote guest.
Yeah, so this is an interesting one, and it's a really interesting workflow, and we've already seen a lot of uses for this, and we've actually fully adopted it ourselves internally, for our own content creation. Basically, in these pandemic times, everyone's been working from home, but our content creation has actually increased while everyone's working from home. And one of the ways we've done that is to leverage our Perl hardware encoders, which of course we luckily have, and individuals in their homes, like myself, have one. I have one sitting on the desk here in front of me. I can't quite put it on camera for you, but I have one sitting on the desk here in front of me.
Right.
And I can send an SRT stream to our main studio in our offices where we have a much stronger internet connection backbone. We can then mix that with other Epiphan employees or even remote guests who are also streaming with SRT, and then ultimately send it back out to whatever CDN we're using, whether that's things like Facebook, YouTube, or Crowdcast is one we've been using for webinars, or whatever it might be. So we can actually have these remote streams coming in, aggregated together. In our case, we're using a Perl 2 in our studio, aggregating them together and then sending them back out. So this allows a lot of flexibility and a higher quality link than you might sometimes see over video conferencing software.
Absolutely. And I think one of the big opportunities we've seen for our dealers, especially again, if we go back to the educational market, taking a Perl Mini encoder and putting that into several classrooms or multimedia labs throughout a campus, and having them being able to communicate together and create this larger ecosystem of live production and streaming is really one of the things that you've done, not only with this firmware, but just in your history with the product and with the technology.
Absolutely. And certainly as we're still all trying to figure out how we, especially in the education market, how we go back to normal, if you will.
Yep.
What we have seen in the meantime is a lot of education institutions who own a fleet of Pearl Minis, for example, is they will pre-configure them and ship them to an instructor or professor's home, and all they need to do is plug it in and basically push a start button, and it's going to be either ingested into, maybe over SRT into a central CDN, or maybe integrated with platforms like Kaltura or Panopto as a content management system. And that makes it very easy to have an extremely high quality setup in someone's home, pre-configured, so they don't have to know a lot about it. They can just kind of plug it in and push go, essentially. And that's making it easier for IT teams trying to distribute this stuff all over the place.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the successes that our dealers across the board have had with the Pro products to begin with, is
Yeah,
that ease of use capability. The fact that
absolutely.
you have the touchscreen control built right into the unit itself really gives any user a very easy out-of-box experience, very simple interface to use, and that's really led to the success not only in the education market but also in the house of worship, where you're relying on maybe less technical people or even volunteers to help your
Right.
production get out to your audience.
Absolutely. And we also have a system through our cloud-based service called AV Studio to actually remotely access Pearls securely through the cloud. So you don't necessarily have to have an expert on site. They just need to be able to get it on the network. And if it's been paired to that cloud system, you could have your remote producer or your remote IT team log in remotely directly to the Pearl without needing to worry about remote desktop software or having them access a computer or any of that stuff. They
Right.
can connect directly to the Pearl, configure everything they need to do, and get it going, which has also allowed for a lot of remote production. And another place where SRT has helped is that you could have a remote producer controlling all of these multiple points simultaneously, and the talent doesn't really have to do anything other than make sure they look good on camera, and that's pretty much it. And this
That's
slide
something you
really
and I still struggle with, George.
definitely, um, the beer helps. But one of the things we have seen already in a very practical example of using SRT in this way is the NFL draft, done essentially remote,
Yep.
was done using SRT as a backbone. They had something like 200 plus endpoints all being aggregated together in order to make that production happen. And it was one of the first large, really substantial examples of SRT being used in that way. Often we've seen previously smaller, just single point to point setups. So that was a really big example of remote production being done leveraging SRT, and it was very successful. And so with the Pearls having that kind of technology, it's something that pretty much anyone can now do on a smaller scale if they need to.
Absolutely. And if you're going to secure a transmission, it has to be from Roger Goodell's man cave.
Yeah.
So, in comparison, in looking at the Pearl systems, this firmware update does apply to the Pearl Mini and the Pearl 2. But
Yeah,
there
and
is still some comparison in how that's implemented across the board.
absolutely. And just for those customers who may even have the older original generation Pearl, which was discontinued a number of years ago, it also got this update and is still
Wow.
capable of SRT. So even though that was a product that hasn't been sold in years, owners of that can also update to this and take full advantage. For the most part, they all do it basically the same way. They can both take an SRT as an encoder to send it out. They can also use an SRT decoder to bring SRT streams in. So that could be from cameras or from other encoders, whether it's Pearls or another one. They can all use the same different levels of encryption options that you might want to choose depending on what your security mandates are.
Okay.
They all support all three SRT connection modes: caller, listener, and rendezvous. Really, where they differ is basically about processing power and how many simultaneous encodes or decodes they can do at a time.
Okay.
So Pearl Mini, we recommend typically at 1080. If you change that, you could might maybe change it a bit, but at 1080p, usually a single SRT input, maybe from a camera. Of
Okay.
course, that could be mixed together with other video signals like HDMI and SDI. That's no problem. And then SRT outputs are encoded out, could be as many as three simultaneously on a Pearl Mini.
Okay.
When we go to the more powerful Pearl 2, then it's 6 and 6. So we can be doing a lot more. And
Sure.
that's one of the reasons why in some of those diagrams you see a Pearl Mini as maybe your source, your
Right.
primary point, and then bringing those in and aggregating them with something like a Pearl 2 or a server that has more power, and then sending them back out once you've mixed and switched everything together.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things I really like about the Pearl family and the product line is that you do have those options that fit into the different aspects of the workflow and the installation. You're not expecting people to spend money necessarily where they don't need to. The
Right.
Pearl Mini at $34.95 is a very affordable solution to create these SRT sources. But now the investment at $63.75 for the Pearl 2 is not a considerable one when you look at the additional features and capabilities that it brings to the table.
Well, exactly. It's more than twice the system at less than twice the price. So I mean, it's very good value when you look at it from that perspective in terms of a lot of the other things that Pearl 2 can do, like NDI, chroma keying, and all these other pieces. So when you look at it, it makes a great cornerstone piece to a studio system, and many of our customers use it that way, including some very big names in the space. But now, since everyone's kind of doing things remotely and figuring out ways to do that, using something that like the Pearl Mini that's smaller, less expensive, and distributing those and then feeding them back to a central point is a really really great tool, and we're really excited to see how everyone's going to leverage that. I know we've had a lot of fun doing it ourselves, so
Sure.
it's really fun. We a while ago, I know you're great friends with the guys over at Bird Dog as well.
We are.
We had them join us on one of our live shows a few weeks ago, and they joined us from Australia via SRT into our studio. And they don't even own a Pearl, but they were able to join me where I was coming in from a Pearl over SRT, so we can have this mixed environment
Yep.
just because we have this shared protocol, and that's really exciting.
Absolutely. And I'm not going to scan all the way back to the SRT Alliance slide, but a lot of that slide does mimic the Broadfield Distributing product line catalog. So it's not
Yeah,
just Epiphan, it's not just Bird Dog, but there's a lot of manufacturers that we do deal with to bring this great new technology to our dealers and to our end users. But
absolutely.
it's not just SRT, there were some other
No.
features added to this firmware update as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're always adding as much stuff as we can, and trying to deliver it in a quickly and timely manner. So this update 4.12 was really all about bringing more modern streaming protocols to the forefront. So SRT is probably the most exciting, I'll be honest,
Sure.
but we also added HLS publishing and MPEG-Dash publishing. Both of these kind of fit into the same area a little bit differently from where SRT fits in kind of the streaming protocol world, but they're also coming to the forefront as potential replacements for RTMP. Again, HLS is great, originally invented by Apple, but starting to be leveraged for a lot of other things, including contribution, partially due to its reliability, although it has very high latency in comparison to something like SRT. MPEG Dash was essentially an open sourced competition to HLS in a lot of ways. It delivers very similar capabilities. But we're starting to see more and more CDNs move away from RTMP and RTMPS for a number of reasons. Either, the distaste for flash-based technologies, which RTMP is,
Sure.
um, just due to its age and limited functionality with new demands and new needs of streaming protocols, whether that's things like multi-channel audio or newer codecs beyond H.264. RTMP can't do that.
Right.
And so we need new protocols in order to get to the next level. And HLS, Dash, and SRT can all do that. And so which ones a CDN will adopt, time will tell. Some of the bigger social media platforms, I would say, are definitely looking more towards things like HLS and Dash. Um, the more enterprise geared things are going to probably lean more towards things like SRT, where the controllability and the encryption security might be more important to them. And so you'll see the private CDN market probably going that way, where the social media market, where latency might not matter as much, go the other way.
Absolutely. And I think one of the reasons that our dealers like offering Epiphan products is your ability to stay on top of all of these different formats and to kind of keep the ball moving forward, but still update your products. Even if we go back to the comparison chart to show that SRT capability built into the original Pearl, that is a great reason that our dealers are establishing relationships with the customers that they're selling these Epiphan video products to.
Yeah, I mean, we're primarily a hardware manufacturer, so we don't want to lock anyone into specific platforms. We want to make sure that they can take a Pearl and use it in a million different ways with whatever CDN they might need. And
Sure.
so making sure we have that flexibility now offering RTMP and RTMPS as we have for quite some time, but the additions of HLS Dash and SRT just really opens it up. Who needs these? You kind of touched on that a little bit. um, at some point they're going to be replacing these older protocols.
Right.
And some of the things that have been improved across all of them is things like, improved network compatibilities in order to get through firewalls, which can be really important for the live event space where they might
Yep.
be in hotels or conference centers, and trying to work with the IT teams of those locations is a challenge at best.
Sure.
Um, and sometimes they just can't do what you're asking in terms of firewall and port manipulation. So making sure we're moving in a direction where the protocol means we don't care is is a big step forward.
Absolutely. And I'm having such a great time talking to you that I'm losing place in the PowerPoint presentation that we're trying to stitch ourselves to. But
Yeah,
here we're talking about a lot of the possibilities for the live streaming and what HLS and MP Dash offer.
exactly. And not all of these are realized yet. These are
Yep.
potentials that are inherently built into the protocol, even if not everyone is using them yet. But multilingual support, certainly here in Canada where I am, that's kind of a big deal. And it's becoming a big deal in the US and all over the world, especially in public sectors where it's becoming legally mandated for either multilingual or closed captioning. And again, these are things that were not built into the older protocols, but are being included as kind of native technologies in these newer protocols. The other one, of course, is DRM.
Yep.
That was actually the primary driving factor, probably, for Apple to create HLS in the first place,
Go
was
figure.
DRM control. And again, probably most people don't care about that for the majority of live streaming, but I think at some point in the future that is something that'll be a bigger deal as we move into a more cord cut world where things are more online and more content is needing to be protected online. I think DRM is going to become a bigger deal.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. And I think we've seen that just over the last few months
Yeah.
with content producers or musicians trying to get their sound out there without
Yeah,
any distribution model available to them other than live streaming.
absolutely. Yeah, and we've kind of mentioned this many times when we're talking to customers is they want to be able to stream things like music on social media platforms, but the robots that essentially control content management and DRM don't know. They just get flagged automatically.
Right.
And part of that is because we don't have a way of setting a flag in the old stream protocols to say, no, I actually have rights to this.
Yes.
And so building that technology in going forward is going to be a really big thing for those kind of content creators.
Absolutely. So we talked about all the exciting new streaming formats. There are some additional feature enhancements as well.
Yeah, so a lot of this is basically, just making things a little easier for people to use.
Sure.
Some of our customers will use multicasting. This is especially true with some of our larger enterprise customers or education customers, where they might use multicasting for things like IPTV or digital signage applications.
Sure.
And previously, we could do one multicast out, and it didn't really have a start stop. Once you started it, it was just running all the time. And IT guys didn't always like that. Sometimes you also needed to have slightly different versions for maybe where you were distributing it to on your network. So with this update, we're now able to do multiple multicast outputs and start and stop them when we need them.
That's
So
great.
it's a quality of life thing, but it is a nice update for those who use multicast.
Absolutely. It's a feature that's there for those who need it.
Exactly.
And no matter how big or small that population may be, the fact that it can be designed in with nothing more than a firmware update, this is kind of what Epiphan does best.
Yeah. So more along the similar line of quality of life updates, our AFU queue management was improved. So AFU stands for automatic file upload.
Okay.
It's a method in which a Perl can automatically push recorded files to a remote file server, external USB drives, that kind of thing. And so we just made some minor improvements there to allow people to manage the queue a little bit better of how those files are placed in the queue and things like that. So there were a few updates there. Again, quality of life things which have come from feedback from our customers. And that's really important to us to make sure that we listen to that feedback, work on those things, and deliver them.
Absolutely. And I would imagine that that's even more important for you as the person who's handling some of these requests and support calls. Anything that you can design into the system is ultimately going to make those calls a lot easier.
Absolutely. I love talking to customers, but the less angry they are, the better.
Of course.
And so, you know, and it's rare that they are angry, luckily, but it's something that at the end of the day, if I don't have to take the call at all because we've made it so easy to use, that's a big win. So one of the other areas, and this is one exactly like you're mentioning, we
Yep.
get a lot of calls on something like this. It's a quality of life thing again, but improving some of the error messaging around live streaming. So previously, you might start an RTMP push to somewhere like Facebook, and something goes wrong, and you just get a message that says connection timed out. Well, really, that doesn't mean anything. Or you might get something that says IO error. Well, nobody knows what that means, honestly. And you have to dig through logs and try and find out exactly what went wrong. So we've tried to update that messaging and make it more clear and understandable for the customers to see exactly what's happening to improve that and speed up their troubleshooting so that hopefully they can either solve the problem themselves or should they have to call us for support, which my team is always happy to provide, we can get to the bottom of it faster and make sure that we can get to the solution quickly. Because at the end of the day, everyone wants to be usually when they're making that phone call, they need to be up now, and so we need to make sure we're getting them to that point as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. It definitely falls under the category of let me help you.
Exactly.
And the better information you have across the board, the better it's going to be. And what
Exactly.
I like here is this is an illustration that shows how that can be communicated right on the Pearl 2 device itself, right
Right.
on the screen on the front of it. It doesn't have to be communicated through the software where everything is being set up and streamed.
Yeah, exactly. And again, previously it would show you an icon there, but if you needed more detail, you'd have to be going into the full administrator UI and finding out what's going on. So
Right.
again, just improving these things so that people can get that information as quick as possible.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, just more information about how these new errors and warnings are being communicated to your customers to allow us and Epiphan to get them the support they need.
Yep.
George, I think that's it. And I think that's a feature packed firmware update.
Well, we definitely have more to come. I mean, this was a good update, but we have
Yep.
more to come. We
Okay.
actually have a pretty small update. It'll be 4.12.1, so more of a small maintenance kind of release.
Okay.
We're hoping that that will come out in the next week or two. Um, Not a ton of features in there, but one that I think some of your dealers will find really exciting, especially in the education market, is that we will be adding support for on-air lights. So USB
Great.
lights you can plug into a Pearl that will illuminate and basically tell everyone in the room or outside the room, depending on where you place the light, that you're on air. And that's something we've had asked many times, and so we are rolling that out very shortly. And then, of course, we have more to come after that as well. So we're really excited to see that. And again, just improving people's workflow, trying to make it as easy as possible to get streaming and recording wherever and whenever.
That's great. And it's nice to see that Epiphan is not resting on their laurels. You're already developing the next update, almost to the point where I feel guilty even keeping any more of your time. So with that, let me let you go, George. Thank you so much for joining us today. And until the next update, cheers.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So for our dealers who do tune in and week out, we have a great schedule set up for you. Next week is actually up in the air. We are working now to schedule our guests, and we'll be able to report the content of our show shortly. The following week, August 20th, we are doing a whole LaCie hard drive product roundup, introducing the brand new LaCie One Big Dock and the One Big Dock SSD, as well as some of their other storage solutions. If you have any questions about the Epiphan products we talked about today, reach out to your Broadfield salesperson at 800-634-5178. My direct email is jim@broadfield.com. And of course, if you need any help with the SRT workflow, we can work with the team at Epiphan, which of course includes George Herbert, our guest today, to help get you the information you need for successful sales. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Cheers.
Broadfield Distributing is a value-added distributor of live production, streaming, video editing, and storage products. We only sell to resellers. We are always looking for new dealers. So call us at 1-800-634-5178 or email sales@broadfield.com. You'll like doing business with Broadfield because we make it easy to do business.